Stop. Before you scroll past this, what you are about to hear is not the separation story the loudest voices in Alberta want you to believe. The headlines have been screaming for months. The political drama has been deafening. But one single poll just dropped, and it has completely shattered the narrative that Alberta is ready to walk away from Canada. The numbers are in, and they are stunning. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you are going to understand exactly what is really happening inside Alberta. The political games, the legal walls, the pipeline deals, and the 2/3 majority that the separatists do not want you to talk about. This is the story they did not see coming. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because we cover stories like this before they become mainstream, and you do not want to miss what comes next. And if you have been watching us for a while, you already know we do not do noise, we do facts. We do depth. So let us get into it. For years, and we mean years, the political story coming out of Alberta has followed one single unbroken script: anger at Ottawa, frustration with federal policies, whispers, then shouts about separation. If you turned on the news, if you scrolled through social media, if you listened to the loudest political voices in the province, you would have walked away thinking that Alberta was already halfway out the door, that the people had made up their minds, that Canada was facing its most serious unity crisis in decades. The separatist movement had flags, rallies, organized factions inside political parties, and politicians who were either cheering it on or too afraid to push back. The noise was enormous, the energy was real, and the rest of Canada was watching with genuine worry. But here is the thing about noise. Sometimes it is loud precisely because it is trying to drown out a different truth. And on one particular day, that different truth arrived in the form of a poll. A single, carefully conducted survey from the Angus Reid Institute, one of the most respected polling organizations in the country, landed in the public sphere and stopped the conversation cold, because the numbers did not match the narrative, not even close. When Albertans were surveyed and asked whether they would support starting the legal process of separation from Canada, 60% said no. Let that land for a moment. 60%. That means for every 10 Albertans you stop on the street, 6 of them, more than half, say they do not want this. Only 35% said they would support it. That is already a significant gap. But then the pollsters asked an even simpler, even more direct question. Not about legal processes or referendums, just the straight question. Do you want Alberta to stay in Canada, or do you want to leave? And when the question was stripped down to its bare bones like that, the gap grew even wider. 67% of Albertans said they want to stay. Just 30% said they want to leave. 2/3 of the province. 2 out of every 3 Albertans, when asked clearly and directly, chose Canada. Now let us talk about where those numbers are coming from, because the regional breakdown is just as telling. In Calgary, Alberta's largest city, its economic engine, the beating heart of the oil industry, 58% of residents reject separation. More than half of Calgary, a city that has been portrayed as ground zero for federal frustration, does not want to leave. Move north to Edmonton, the provincial capital, and the rejection is even stronger. 73% of Edmontonians want to stay in Canada. Nearly 3/4. That is not a close call. That is a landslide. Now, rural Alberta is a different picture. And this is important, because rural Alberta is where the separatist movement draws much of its energy and its loudest voices. Outside the big cities, the province splits almost perfectly down the middle. 48% supporting separation, 48% opposing it. Rural Alberta is genuinely divided. But rural Alberta is not all of Alberta. And when you add it all together, the provincial picture is unmistakably clear. Most Albertans, a strong, solid majority, are not ready to blow up the country. And there is one more number from that poll that deserves its own moment. 51% of Albertans found the official referendum question confusing. More than half the province read the 37 words that were carefully crafted by the government to frame this vote, and they said, "What does this actually mean?" That is not a small thing. That is a foundational problem for any democratic exercise. If your voters cannot clearly understand what they are being asked, the entire process loses its legitimacy before a single ballot is cast. Now, to understand why the referendum question is confusing, you have to understand the political chess game that is happening at the very top of Alberta's government. Because the person who called this referendum, Premier Danielle Smith, is also the person who, on the very same day this poll dropped, went on social media and told Albertans that she will personally vote to remain in Canada on October 19th. Read that again. The Premier of Alberta called a separation referendum and then publicly announced she is going to vote against separation. She said she hopes others will join her. She is literally campaigning against the very vote she triggered. How does that happen? How does a sitting premier end up in a position this contradictory? The answer is inside her own party. Danielle Smith leads the United Conservative Party, and inside that party, there is a powerful, organized, and very serious separatist faction. These are not fringe voices. These are people with money, organization, grassroots networks, and genuine ideological conviction. They have been pushing for a referendum for a long time, and they have enough influence within the UCP that Smith could not simply ignore them or shut them down without risking a devastating split in her own coalition. So she made a political calculation. She agreed to hold the referendum. But she designed it in a very specific way, not to ask Albertans directly whether they want to leave Canada, but to ask them whether they want to begin a legal process that could eventually lead towards separation. It is a technicality, but it is a meaningful one. It gives the hardliners their vote while giving everyone else a more ambiguous, process-oriented question to respond to. It was a maneuver designed to keep the party together while not actually setting the province on fire. The problem is that Albertans saw through it. The poll found that 58% of people in the province believe Smith's only real reason for calling this referendum is to keep the hardliners inside her party happy. And 56% of Albertans feel she has handled the entire separation issue poorly. So you have a premier who is simultaneously trying to satisfy a separatist wing of her party and reassure the majority of voters who do not want separation, and managing to fully satisfy neither. It is one of the most difficult political tightropes in recent Canadian history, and right now, the polls suggest she is wobbling on it. Meanwhile, several hundred kilometers away in Ottawa, the federal government is watching all of this unfold, and Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded in a way that has surprised a lot of observers, because instead of panic, instead of confrontation, instead of the kind of sharp, federal-provincial battles that have historically poured fuel on Western alienation, Carney has responded with something closer to calm, strategic confidence. He is treating the separation push as what it may very well be, a dangerous bluff that is more likely to backfire on its architects than to actually succeed. Carney reached back into history and pulled out a comparison that landed hard. He pointed to Brexit in 2016, the United Kingdom's referendum to leave the European Union. A narrow vote, a confusingly worded question, a campaign driven by emotion and grievance rather than detailed planning, and the result was not liberation. The result was a decade of economic pain, political paralysis, diplomatic isolation, and a national identity crisis that the UK is still working through today. Carney's message was direct. A narrow vote and a confusing question do not deliver clarity. They deliver years of regret. But Carney is not just warning. He is also wooing. In the days just before this poll was released, he flew to Calgary and sat down with Danielle Smith for a face-to-face meeting. The agenda was not confrontation. It was partnership. The two leaders were working on what could become a major accord, a deal that could unlock the construction of a new oil pipeline carrying Alberta energy all the way to the Pacific coast. Think about what that means for a moment. Alberta's energy sector has been fighting for expanded export capacity for years. The inability to get oil to tidewater has cost the province billions in lost revenue because landlocked oil sells at a discount compared to oil that can reach international markets. A Pacific pipeline would be transformative for Alberta's economy, and Carney is dangling it, not as a threat, not as a transaction, but as a genuine partnership between provinces and the federal government. It is a sophisticated play. It acknowledges Alberta's legitimate economic grievances without validating the separatist response to those grievances. It reframes the conversation from confrontation to collaboration. And it puts Smith in a position where working with Ottawa can actually deliver something real and tangible for her province, which makes the case for staying in Canada far more compelling than any speech ever could. But the political and economic dimensions of this story are not the only walls that the separation movement is running into. There are legal walls as well, and they are significant. In a development that has received less attention than it deserves, an Alberta court recently threw out a key separation petition. The reason was straightforward, but deeply important. The government had not properly consulted with Indigenous communities before moving forward. This is not a procedural technicality that can be quietly fixed with a form. Indigenous consultation rights in Canada are constitutionally protected and legally robust. Any major provincial or national decision that affects Indigenous lands and rights, and separation would affect virtually everything, requires genuine, meaningful consultation with First Nations. The court's decision sent a clear signal. You cannot separate Alberta from Canada while ignoring the Indigenous peoples whose rights and territories are embedded throughout this land. And beyond the courts, independent legal and policy experts have been laying out just how staggeringly complex actual separation would be. This is not a decision you make on a Tuesday and execute by Friday. The untangling would take decades. Pensions. Millions of Albertans have Canada Pension Plan contributions. What happens to those? Debt. Alberta is part of Canada's national fiscal framework. How do you divide federal debt? Military assets, bases, equipment, personnel, all of it would need to be renegotiated. Trade. Alberta trades with other provinces under a single national framework, and separation would immediately trigger complex and potentially hostile renegotiations. And that does not even begin to address the question of Alberta's relationship with the United States, which would need to be entirely rebuilt from scratch as a new independent country rather than a Canadian province with the backing of an established G7 nation. The people arguing for separation are not explaining how any of this gets resolved. They are speaking in the language of grievance and emotion, which is powerful, genuinely powerful, but it does not build a pension system or negotiate a trade deal. And the longer you look at the practical reality, the clearer it becomes that separation is not a clean break. It is a generational disruption, with costs that would fall hardest on the very Albertans who feel most left behind right now. So where does all of this leave us? The vote is set for October 19th. Both sides have roughly 5 months to make their case to the people of Alberta. 5 months of door-knocking, social media campaigns, rallies, debates, and political maneuvering. The separatist hardliners inside the UCP are not going anywhere. They are organized, they are motivated, and they genuinely believe in what they are fighting for. They will use every tool available to them to shift those polling numbers in their favor. Do not underestimate them. But the evidence right now tells a clear story. The story is that Canada is holding together. not because of federal pressure, not because of political deals, but because when you ask Albertans, ordinary Albertans, not the loudest voices in the room, when you ask them clearly and simply whether they want to stay or go, 2 out of 3 say stay. That is the story that got buried under months of separation headlines. That is the number that changes everything. The anger in Alberta is real. The frustration with Ottawa is real. The sense that the province's contributions have not been properly valued is real. These are legitimate feelings held by real people, and anyone who dismisses them is making a serious mistake. But feeling frustrated with your federal government is not the same as wanting to blow up your country, and the poll makes clear that most Albertans, even now, even after years of tension, understand the difference. There is a version of this story where Alberta's legitimate grievances get heard, where a Pacific pipeline gets built, where fiscal arrangements get updated to better reflect the province's contributions, where a new chapter in the relationship between Alberta and the rest of Canada gets written. That version requires political courage on both sides, from Smith to stop playing games with a question that confuses her own voters, and from Carney to deliver on the partnership he is promising rather than just talking about it. Whether that courage materializes in the next 5 months is the real question hanging over October 19th. What is clear is this. The separatist wave that was supposed to be unstoppable just ran into a wall of polling data, legal rulings, constitutional complexity, and the quiet but firm voice of a majority of Albertans saying, "Not yet, not this way, and maybe not at all." The story of Alberta in 2025 and 2026 is not the story of a province leaving Canada. It is the story of a province wrestling with its identity, its grievances, and its future, and so far, choosing to wrestle from inside the country rather than outside it. That could change. Politics is fluid. 5 months is a long time, and motivated minorities have a way of punching above their weight in referendum campaigns. But right now, tonight, with this poll on the table and this political landscape in front of us, Canada is holding, and that is not nothing. In a world full of fractures and divisions, a 2/3 majority choosing unity is worth saying out loud. Before you go, drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think the separation movement in Alberta can actually gain momentum before October? Or is this poll the beginning of the end for it? We read every single comment, and this is exactly the kind of conversation we want to have with you. And if this video gave you a clearer picture of what is really happening in Alberta, not the headline version, but the real version, share it. Send it to someone who thinks they know this story, because chances are they have only heard the loud part. Now they can hear all of it.